by listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that you will be hearing dirty, dirty words and whatever else we feel like saying, whether you want to hear it or not. And there may be some fine print somewhere about being reassured, resurrected into Satan's army, or damned of the damned, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. I actually like that one. It's like the best line out of the whole thing.
You want to try that one again then?
So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Spawnometer. I'm your host, Mr. Fix-It, and today I have with me
Diablo Frank.
And today we're going to spawn your mind all night long. Oh, yeah. With Tales of Spawn issue 6 and 7.
No, we're only going to do issue 6. We only do one issue of Spawn.
Oh, you bastard.
No.
So you didn't just kick my left nut. You decided to kick my right nut as well? Because that's what it was reading these two books.
We're just peek behind the curtain. We're going to record them both at basically the same time, but we're going to spread them out over 2 episodes.
Oh.
So what we're doing is our pain is magnified to diminish their pain.
Oh, it's great pain. Oh, my God.
So to give you a little backstory on this one, Spawn number 6 was released on December the 11th, 1992. It was the first Image comic to release 6 issues, which was twice as many as its next closest competitors, Savage Dragon, Shadowhawk, and WildCATs, all of which had their 3rd issue out the same month.
Okay.
With the exception of the Images of Tomorrow stunt, where several titles jumped ahead to their 25th issues for 1 month before returning to their original numbering, Spawn remains the first Image comic to ever reach any given issue number going forward. So like Spawn number 100 was the first 100, Spawn number 150 was the first 150, so on and so forth.
And they're like in their 300s right now, or close to, ain't they?
They're getting there, yeah. I think they're in the high 200s now.
Okay. Jeez.
And I just got the most recent Spawn trade paperback, which is a big fat beast, because it wraps up the last 3 or 4 issues of Eric Larson's run.
Oh.
And then it segues into the Todd McFarlane, Simone, the old guys who used to do the book. They took the book back over, but it's done differently. And then there's a new creative team that's taken over since then, but I haven't gotten that trade yet.
Is Eric Larson stuff any good?
You read Spawn Saga?
Did you read it?
You still haven't read the Satan Saga Wars? I loaned it to you.
Yeah, it's back there. I just haven't read it.
It's really far in advance. I liked Satan Saga Wars okay, and I was debating. I liked it just enough where I'm like, do I want to continue with this or not? And then I went ahead and I read 1 issue past that from the collection. I was like, yeah, I kind of like where this is going. And then of course they change it, but the new trade was so economically priced. It's something like 10 issues for the price of a regular trade, so I couldn't pass it up.
Okay, cool. I'll borrow yours and okay. Yeah. I'll read it.
And I need to read mine too. I'm hoping that they maintain the quality of at least the Eric Larson stuff. Yeah.
Cool.
But it doesn't really matter because they're going to have a different creative team after that anyway.
And just hit the reset button again?
It's a course change. I don't know if it's a reset, though. Okay. So let's talk about Spawn number 6, though.
So we're introduced to Overt-Kill, a mafia hitman who was, I'm assuming, built by the government.
Did they ever actually say how he got built?
I don't believe so.
I think he might have been built by the mob using, like, advanced science.
Well, I know he was a mob. He's like a mob hitman, and the reason
and he's like old school mob, too. He's like, because I think the issue starts in Sicily, doesn't it?
Yeah. He's in Sicily, the old country. But they make a big deal about his name comes from the fact that he gets overly enjoyment from killing. He goes beyond just killing them. So it's Overt-Kill.
Do you know the story of Overkill, by the way?
Wasn't he called Overkill one time?
Yes, he was.
Because I swear I have the toy that says Overkill.
I think in the original comics he was Overkill, too.
Oh, okay. And then they changed it.
Well, do you know the story of his creation?
No.
So I have in front of me Wizard Magazine number 7, and they have an ad in here where you can win an Overkill lithograph signed by Stan Lee, Rob Liefeld, and Todd McFarlane, courtesy of New Graphics Express, Staber Home Video, and Wizard. Overkill is a creation of Stan Lee, Rob Liefeld, and Todd McFarlane. He was born during the taping of the Overkill video from Staber Home Video.
I'm going to throw, and I promise you, we haven't rehearsed this, I'm going to throw a name at them, and they're going to create a character based on what I tell them, and you better make it good. Okay, now I've got this name. I've been wanting to do a movie with this title. I never thought of it as the name of a character, but it occurs to me it's the kind of name I think you guys could play with. And the name is Overkill. Now, I'm hitting you with that. He's obviously got to be the roughest, toughest, meanest hero, if you will, ever done before. So you You've got about 20 minutes. Give it your best, and be careful, because I'm watching every move.
Okay, what we'll do is we're going to try to do a collaboration. We'll be adding back and forth to it. And what we'll do is we'll try to explain our thinking on how we're coming across and why we're doing Overkill the way it is.
You can think and draw at the same time?
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
We've even talked. So what we'll do is Rob will start doing the outline, and because we're going to do this and put it in a comic book, I'll be working on the logo. So by the time he's got the outline, I'll be done with the logo, and then we'll start going from there.
The video is 100% art and shows exactly how these mega talents brought Overkill to life.
Rob, are we going to make him thick, or are we going to make him...
have the obligatory strong, heroic character over there, right?
He's got to be a guy. He's got to be huge.
Thick neck, broad shoulders.
Thickest neck.
Are you going to give him the usual shoulder pads?
I don't know. I'm not real sure yet. What do you think, Todd?
I don't know. A Liefeld character without shoulder pads is almost naked.
We got to have guns. We got to have
armor.
Armament.
Overkill.
Armor and armament.
Okay. One thing that I think the kids also like is why don't we come in with... The kids like chains.
You can win a lithograph signed by all 3 creators or any of these other great prizes. And then they give you all the address and the qualifications. And they give you an image of Overkill. I don't think this is the actual drawing by Rob Liefeld. I think that this is a recreation they did for the video box cover or something.
Oh, that's pretty close. He's smaller.
Did you ever watch the video?
No.
They've got it online on YouTube. You can check it out if you want to.
Definitely will.
I wouldn't be in a rush. I watched it because have you ever watched any of those Staber videos?
Mm-mm.
They're okay. They're basically...
is that the one where they're like interviewing them while they draw?
Exactly.
Oh, I've seen a couple.
Yeah.
I think I saw Jim Lee one.
I don't know if I've ever seen the Jim Lee one. I've seen the Liefeld one several times at this point, especially for the show. But even before that, I'd seen that one a few times because that was the first one out the gate, if I remember correctly. And I've seen bits and pieces. I think I had when they came out with a VHS compendium that collected all of the creators. That's the one that I saw. So I've seen bits of all of them, but I haven't seen all of very many of them. Mm-hmm. I think they probably recorded the Todd McFarlane and Rob Liefeld one on the same day.
He's going to do the character here, and while he's doing that, I think what we'll do is just to make him cool for a poster, we'll put some gunshot wounds back into the wall here.
Sounds good.
Terrific.
Okay, what do you think? Should he have hair or should he be bald?
Make him bald.
He can be pretty tough-looking bald, can't he?
Oh, I think so.
Yep.
I think
I keep telling that to myself as I keep losing my hair.
Definite sign of baldness.
And so they proceed to start creating a character. It's credited all 3 of them, but the truth is, Todd McFarlane, for the most part, just came up with a logo, and he added some bullshit like chains and shit to it. And it's really Rob Liefeld who draws the whole character for the most part. So it's really his creation.
Oh, wow.
But McFarlane is the guy who actually incorporated him in the comics first. I'm not sure how the copyright situation works out. There's obviously a lot of problematic continuity issues with relation to a whole bunch of these image characters. I mean, my theory, I think it was possibly a preemptive measure, but Marvel UK subsequently released a bi-weekly anthology of their books to the British market titled Overkill, and the Guardians of the Galaxy villain Taserface was renamed Overkill in the US to secure that trademark here. So when Image Comics wished to use the character created for the Saber video, they had to clumsily redub him Overt-Kill, interchangeably spelled both with and without a hyphen.
Huh.
So that's how he became Overt-Kill, because Marvel, if you remember correctly, Marvel was being very protective of trademarks that time period. Mm-hmm. They managed to tie up a whole bunch of Defiance money by coming out with a bullshit character that nobody remembers called Plasmer, and that prevented them from coming out with a comic called Plasm.
I remember that.
They did that, I think, on purpose just to fuck over Defiant and make that company tumble before it even got started.
Wow.
Yeah.
Some more of that inside baseball, folks. Okay.
But yeah, so for a while there, and again, I believe including on the original toys, he was Overkill before they had to fix it.
Yeah, I think it's on my wall. Like, I put all the toys on the wall, and I think he's one on there.
And see, for the longest time, I thought that it was a Marvel UK character named that, but it turned out that was Kill Power, who was a sidekick to Motormouth. But that was just me.
Okay, because I remember Motormouth, because I remember that's when I was reading Death Head.
Yeah, I read a lot of the early Marvel UKs because I'd read Marvel UK. My brother got me into them. He brought home an issue of Dragon's Claws for me when he went to visit his grandparents in London. I started collecting from there, and I actually, specifically the Death's Head and the Dragon's Claw stuff, I've had runs of those at one point.
Cool.
So about Overkill.
Okay, so
he's killing people in Sicily.
Overkill. He's killing people in Sicily, and the local mob boss is pissed because Spawn is killing off a lot of mobsters.
No, remember it was the Violator that was killing him, but Spawn,
that's right,
I guess,
that's right. Yeah,
I think Spawn got blamed for it.
That's right, but Spawn gets...
And who is the local mob boss?
It's not Tony Twist.
Absolutely is Tony Twist.
Oh, is it?
Antonio Tony Twist Twistelli.
Who he got sued for because it was a hockey player.
Yeah, there was a hockey player by that same name, and I always thought that was like a nickname, that the guy's name wasn't really Tony Twist. He decided to just take that nickname and turn it into a character. No, that's the dude's real fucking name.
Tony Twist, yeah.
And so the dude sued him for $15 million, and ultimately McFarlane settled for $5 million. God. which is one of those things that'll really eat into your empire in the early days, especially.
I'm sure he just drew more sketches, made it all that.
And so because of the Violator killing all those mobbed up guys, Tony sent out guys to kill homeless people searching
To draw
for
them
Spawn.
out. Yeah, to draw out Spawn. Which Spawn does come out and more out of them both. He kills both of the mobsters, at which point now Tony decides he needs to bring in the big gun, which I believe he says at one point, and he asks the Don in Sicily if they can borrow Overt-Kill because they have a job for him down there. And I think he even has to get like the group okay on it. Cause
Yeah, all the local, what do they call that? Where
crime bosses.
Yeah, but they have like a name for that where you like a consortium of mob bosses. Don't they have like a name for that?
I'm a consortium of mob bosses? Like, okay. I don't know. I mean,
but they even like panel by panel, they show all these guys and
they're all
like,
agreeing.
Yeah, let's whack him. Yeah, let's whack him. Let's whack him.
Yeah.
Very fucking redundant.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
And
did
so,
I don't remember any of those guys ever turning up again either.
No.
So there's no reason to show every one of their faces panel after panel.
Yeah, well, it was a little confusing because I wasn't 100% sure because they never really state who they were. You just kind of had to put that together. I did anyway when I was reading it. Overt-Kill is sent in. So I'm trying to not get into issue 7 so quickly.
It kind of bleeds
because we're already pretty much finishing issue 6 because that's the whole bit is that Overt-Kill sent to take care of Spawn.
And they do actually fight. Their first fight is in that issue.
Is it?
Yeah, the first fight's in that issue.
Tell me you're not the guy who took out Tony's men. Tell me it's somebody with some balls. And not some no-talent asshole.
Overkill is aware of the Youngbloods, and is still at the point in Image Comics where most superheroes are just referred to as Youngbloods, and Overkill hates the Youngbloods. He goes after Spawn. This is the first time we see Spawn's chains animate and act on their own. Spawn didn't do it consciously, but the chains acted to defend him against Overkill. Spawn also has a memory that he is actually a veteran cyborg fighter. That back when he was in the military, he had dealt with cyborgs, but never won as advanced as Overkill. So it shows that not only was he probably a military man, but he must have been in some pretty serious shit to have that kind of background.
Yeah.
Though the uniform will often protect him, a Spawn is not invincible. Each battle drains his strength, propelling him toward the inevitable, his final descent into hell.
The Spawnometer is ticking down, and rather than use his raw power against Overkill, he allows Overkill to beat him to a deathly state and leave him in that state. Spawn realizes that he's going to have to respond to this, although I don't know why. He could have just like laid low and let Overkill go back home, and that would probably been the end of it. But instead, he decides what he's going to do is take advantage of the skills that he has at his muscle memory, if not active memory. He's going to go get some guns and use guns against Overkill instead of wasting his necromantic powers.
And he teleports, doesn't he?
Yeah, he teleports. Well, but then now we're getting into issue 7. Though.
Okay, because that's a really weird teleport because it's kind of like this.
Yeah, let's save that for issue 7 though. So some more background. This was Payback Part 1. The issue was dedicated to Stan Lee, which was like a nice nod to the Stabler video, and also I believe the first time that they dedicated to a pure writer in an Image comic. Oh, hey, and what did you think of the cover, by the way?
I mean, it's typical McFarlane covers. I mean, very detailed. It doesn't stand out as anything unusual. They didn't have multiple covers yet, right?
No, thankfully. I really hate that whole thing, you know, with the multiple covers. I thought it was an okay cover just because when you tell me picture Overkill, that's usually the thing that I remember. Is, oh yeah, that's the one with Overkill on it. And the Spawn covers really run together after a while.
Yeah.
They just all kind of become of a piece. So at least by having Overkill on the cover, you know, oh, this is the one with Overkill in it.
I think the one thing that stood out in my mind is there's a spot where Spawn lands on the ground, where he jumps. He's in the shadow. And I swear to God, it looks like Spider-Man with a cape. He's doing the whole Spider-Man, like...
The crouch.
Yeah.
That, and there's still a lot of cheats in both of issues 6 and 7 where all of a sudden, like, half everything or all of everything's on a silhouette. It works fine because he puts the detail in other areas, so I guess it's okay for him to cheat. It's not egregious enough to where I need to call it out in depth, but it's like, I see what you're doing there, McFarlane, though.
So, wait a minute. He drew it. He wrote it. Did he color it?
No.
Did he
Steve
letter
Oliff was coloring the
Did he
Spawn
letter it?
comic. Tom Orzechowski was lettering it.
Well, no, you already franked me twice, so I'm done. I'm good.
So what do you think of Overkill's design, and what do you think of him as a character in general?
I always, for some reason, when I think of him, I always picture the large, like that same one, holding and this is going to kind of date me a little bit, where you pay for parking.
The meter. Parking meter,
yeah. The parking meter.
Why did that date you? They have parking meters still.
Do they?
Yeah, they still have parking meters all over Houston.
No, but not coin-operated ones.
They take bills now.
Yeah, no, the new ones, no.
Yeah, it's not the kind where you actually have to turn it. Yeah, it's not
I'm talking like the old school ones that they have the coin. Those, you don't see those anymore, where they have the little, I saw
one at Six Flags. They're a little fake town, like they have the fake Gotham.
Oh, it's a fake town, dude.
Right. They actually have a Batman parking meter there that you can put change into and it goes to charity.
Okay, but see,
and you crank it and it expires over time and shit.
But see, those
functions.
I mean, that's a cool idea. Actually, that's a really cool concept for donations. But I still picture that toy artwork that I saw where he's holding one of those as a weapon with concrete on the end of it, ready to fight. That's the only image I ever come up with.
Was that the first one? Because they did 2 overkills for the Spawn toy line, right?
Yeah, they did several, actually. There's one where his head popped. There's the very, very basic one, which I have. I have the first line of all the toys.
Yeah.
And again, at that time, it was the thing to buy. You know, everybody wanted those toys. And so I found them, so I went ahead and put them up on my wall, just kind of a nice little nod to the toys. The second one was the more detailed. He had the spinning, some kind of claw. It was more...
really fucking big and heavy.
Yeah, that one was like, I would even say more anime influence type toy.
More exaggerated for sure.
Yeah, this one, you gotta remember, those first runs are very basic toys.
Yeah.
They were still
far in advance of anything
any toys that were out there. But those were
he was part of the very first line, wasn't he?
I believe so, yeah. There was Spawn, Violator. Shit, I can't remember them all. But I just remember that, for some reason, that image always sticks in my head when I think of him. That, and every time they show them, he's either missing an arm or he's like half destroyed every time.
Yeah, he's definitely part of that cliche. I don't like Overkill. He's not that kind of character that I tend to like. He's kind of like the Image Comics Juggernaut to some degree. But I know that he's a distinctive Spawn villain and a distinctive Image Universe villain. I don't confuse him with anybody else. If I see this big bald guy in that bluish tone, like metallic costume and shit, I know, that's Overkill. Yeah. And they redesigned him a few times over the years, but he's still, that's Overkill. So I can't say that I'm a fan, and it's obviously a stupid name by necessity, thanks to Marvel's cock blocking. But he's okay. I like that there's still some, at least back then, you had Image Universe characters, and Overkill was kind of part of this greater universe. He doesn't necessarily belong entirely to any one creator, although obviously he favors the McFarlane stuff.
Yeah, I can see that.
But I don't think the designs are that great.
It's very basic, dude. A fucking 10-year-old could have came up with that. I mean,
and I will say that the design improved from the original Saber video to him being used by McFarlane, but everything that was wrong with Overkill in the original design was really McFarlane's fault. He did this stupid boot thing where he put like this peacock thing on his boot, and I don't see the chains being necessary, especially since you've got Spawn running around. That's kind of his thing, but he's okay. I don't hate him.
Well, okay, so let's be honest. Chains for McFarlane are like Layfield's pockets.
Yes, it very much is.
That's
McFarlane's pockets.
It's either webbing
pouches,
or chains.
Yeah.
So I
not even so much. The chains are so a McFarlane gimmick. Yeah, it's it's kind of a staple, and he stole it from Ghost Rider, so that's kind of sad too. It's a secondhand gimmick.
So besides that, the issue was. The writing is, you're making me read his old books again, and man, I didn't realize how bad the writing was. I can't say that too much because I'm sure if a young kid reads that, it's great to him. That's perfect. I got a lot of miles under my belt of a lot of books I've read, and that will influence anything new I read. So if I read something that I probably enjoyed back then, now it doesn't hold up very well because, I'm looking for these little nuances in the writing type or the character development or just something that's going to catch my attention where that shit was just like fucking just real basic. I'm not hating on it because I'm sure I enjoyed it at a young age. And I'm sure if I gave those to a 15-year-old, he'd be like, these are fucking badass. But as an adult, I just can't see an adult like saying this is great writing.
I think that it's very much the kind of comic that you wanted to read when you were 8 and an adult did not want you to have when you were 8.
Yeah.
But that really does feel like somewhat the target demo, 8 to 12, I would say. At the time that comic came out, that was among the 2 issues that convinced me that I was not going to continue to buy Spawn after the Rider series.
Oh, really?
And I only bought 6 and 7 because I knew I was going to get the Rider series and there was this hump I had to get over. But by the time I got done with this arc, I was like, okay, I'm not coming back after this is over with. Yeah. So it wasn't terrible to reread it again, but it's not something I would read today, obviously. So
it was terrible for me, man. It was an absolute chore because I've already read better Spawn stories written by amazing storytellers like Alan Moore. Not the Larson stuff, but I'm pretty sure Larson stuff's going to be good. I'm trying to think who else. Just other stuff that they took the character in a direction resolution that felt like good for that character. Where I don't know, man. I can't hate on him. He's barely learning his writing craft. I haven't read.
No, that's bullshit. He'd already written a year and a half of Spider-Man, so he's not like a new writer. I think he's learning how to work without an editor, though. I think that he probably had a lot of help when he was doing Spider-Man from his editors and may not have realized or appreciated how much help he was getting until he had to do it completely on his own. And I think that Spawn 1 through 4 is better than I remembered it, where issues 6 through 7 are about as bad as I remember them being. The story itself feels like he's filling time until the writer series his own self.
Yeah.
I'm doing that as a reader, but he feels like he's doing it as a writer too. It's like, I'll just throw out this Overkill to
Oh yeah, the story has like no ramification whatsoever. It's
a throwaway character. Yeah,
it's an absolute just throwaway story. I mean, Overkill could have made a guest appearance in an issue, and you would have known who he is, and then used him in a real story. Because this story does feel like absolutely like a throwaway story. I don't ever have to read it again, and I never will.
Unless I force you to for a podcast.
Oh no, we're done, dude. I'm never going back.
Well, no, when we do the video version, when we do the vlog, when we move on to the vlog, we'll have to reread it.
We'll see about that. So, is that it, or?
Yeah, that's it for that one.
That's for Mac.
Now I want to talk a little bit about WildCATs Covert-Action-Teams. They're all depicted here, about 8 alien beings, sort of some are half alien, against the evil shape-shifting aliens who are trying to just, take over the world.
They fear, so here's the fact. So we got power to the max. You know what commands nails when all else fails. Called nerves of steel. Here's the deal. You better watch out.
And the good thing, I don't have any notes on WildCATs. Well, I have very few notes.
Well, it's okay. We could literally watch the cartoon and it'll explain the entire fucking comic book series. Actually, I forgot when I was reading this stuff about Wetworks. I totally forgot about Wetworks. Wasn't there another group?
We'll get there.
But wasn't there another group of like...
Stormwatch?
No. Wasn't another group like... Because Wetworks kills like vampires and werewolves and shit like that, if I remember correctly.
Operation Night Strike?
There's Gene 13.
Team 1? Team 7?
Team 7. Well, no, that's all the original daddies and shit like that. Got the psychic powers, I guess. Never mind.
Okay. Quick look at the Image Comics timeline. Spawn number 2 was released on July 3rd, 1992. Was the first Image comic to ship a second issue 1 month after the first. Compare that to Youngblood number 2, which was released on the same day and tied for the second issue of an Image comic, but came out nearly 3 months after Youngblood number 1. Thus, it receives the dubious distinction of being the first extremely late successive issue of an Image comic. But the following month marked another major launch, WildCATs Covert-Action-Teams number 1 on August 7th, 1992. It was the 4th new Image title and 6th individual Image comic released. I want to read some material from Wizard number 9, which was a very important book for me because that's when the full Image revolution began in earnest. Because while I think that the actual story had been broken perhaps earlier, probably from like Comic Buyer's Guide or something, Wizard was still like the place for fandom even at that point, or was becoming the place where fandom gathered to learn comic news. And this was where the Image creators actually all got together and gave their information on each of their titles. And I wanted to read you some stuff that Jim Lee had offered in that interview.
Howdy, true believers. This is Jim Lee here. I'm not normally like this. I've just been hanging around Stan Lee too much. Basically, we're here in Homage Studios, and I'm going to talk about my new book coming out called WildCATs Covert-Action-Teams. It debuts in late July, early August. Hopefully, I'll get it done in time. I'll show you some of the characters I've got cooking.
So Lee writes, I'm going to be working with a friend of mine who has been helping me out with some stories. His name is Brandon Choi. He works with me on the X-Men stuff, and I've known him since the 4th grade. My book had to be tailored to the things Rob is establishing. It does make things a little difficult. I'm doing a book called WildCATs, and basically since Rob was starting this Youngblood thing to do something different, I'm going to say they are covert, purely covert, even though part of Youngblood is. What if a company existed that was a multinational conglomerate with billions of dollars? They're not going to stop at bribing politicians to exert threat world influence. So what if they hired superpowered people to act as their agents abroad? And what if you had a cabal, a number of corporations around the world who were doing this and then setting their teams against each other to further their company's ultimate agenda? I haven't figured out the name of this company. Maybe Image? The leader of this company is Imp. He's this real diminutive, cocky leader who's not the greatest role model for the Wildcats. To say any more would be ruining future issues.
He's always got a tie and a suit. His hair is always slicked back, dark hair on the sides. Got triangular eyebrows, small triangular nose, kind of smirk, cigar, since he's the CEO of a company. Mischievous eyes with a little gleam in them. There you have it. I mean, I rendered the heck out of this thing and put a lot more lines and rendering and black and everything. But essentially, this makes up Imp. This is the shorthand to this character, and this is how you recognize this character as being Imp.
It goes a lot deeper than that, and there is an ultimate plan being enacted here, not just mindless scuffles over turf and other resources. I see each book as a chapter in a novel, but being able to stand on its own.
Essentially, they're led by this character here, Imp, and he's not upside down. He's just kind of sleeping off a bad hangover in an alleyway. Anyway, I don't get too much into the character, but he starts out as this kind of wandering, kind of wino, homeless person who's basically discovered by a sort of cosmic lady in the lake character called Void, who basically puts a quest on his shoulders to lead a superpowered beings called the WildCATs.
He sort of has this cosmic being who is his counselor, and her name is Void.
And Void essentially is an oval head, 2 eyes, a nose, lips, and then she's got the funky costume, thinner neck. Then you put all this kind of line work to make the costume all shimmery, makes her look more cosmic. And maybe put a little shine here. This is essentially the character. Now let's go through the characters a little bit. You met Imp and Void already.
The covert action team is called Strafe, which is made up of Spartan, Morph, Zealot, the Grifter, and a guy named Hadrian. He's going to have a codename soon, since everyone hates his name. They are all endowed with different powers, and they're going to be introduced in a 3-part miniseries. I'll be coming back in January of 93 with a regular series, assuming the miniseries, which will be coming out in July, August, and September, goes well. I'm going to be taking some time off since I have a baby coming in July. Wildcats will be the only book I'll be doing starting in January. Sylvester starts talking about how he has a fast character in his book Cyberforce, and Jim Lee's like, I have a fast character. And as I recall, there weren't any fast Wildcats, so maybe that changed.
Well, yeah, because all you had is Velocity, and I think she was part of Whatworks.
So then they started talking about a staggered release schedule, with Lee saying that the rationale behind all of this is to come out with products slowly over the course of the year with high quality to ensure that we have enough exposure in the marketplace and so we don't crowd each other out. They didn't really have a problem with that in that first year or so. And when people started to say whether or not they could get out a book on a monthly basis, Jim Lee pointed out, I've been doing it for 5 years.
Throw that shade.
Well, what's funny is I remember him missing time even when he was on X-Men, because remember, like, he bowed out for like half the Extinction Agenda and kept having fill-in guys. The Muir Island saga, he had fill-ins come in for him, trying to say how Image is going to thrive, where a lot of other creators who had tried to do something like Image in the past hadn't quite pulled it off. Lee pointed out that we have to take our shot now as opposed to 15 years from now when we're bitter old men. You have to do it in your prime. The thing is, the opportunity to create and draw and write or tell stories with characters you own outright appeals to me because it brings me back to a time when I was a kid in grade school and high school when I drew my own characters. If I drew the Avengers, it was because my team was pummeling them. And I never had that feeling when I was creating stuff for Marvel because it always had to fit in the Marvel universe. They have certain rules about what can be done and what can't be done. Once you've created a character, another guy can use in his book and do things with it. Creating stuff for the Image line has brought me back to the time when I was a kid when I could create on the fly. That's cool. There's a villain and this is their hideout and this is their code word, whatever I want. For me, I wish I could do both X-Men and Wildcats in that I feel a certain loyalty to the fans who have supported me in my career and who have supported the X-Men. But the simple fact is, like Todd, I would rather do one good book than try to hack out 2 books and get them out on time. So what it comes down to is if Wildcats works out well, that's the book I'm doing.
And selling to DC with all the properties.
We're not flooding the market with 50 new books, and we're not using any guy we can find on the street to draw stuff. Getting back to your question about what makes this product different from anything else, I would hope that the quality would be better. But not only that, it's a virgin universe. It's not something that you have to read years and years of to understand. There should be a sense that you're jumping in at the very beginning, the ground floor. And because we're not going to be just inundating the market with more and more books, it's the kind of development that will be done carefully and slowly with all of the creators' approval. I can't just do things with Spawn without Todd okaying it. And hopefully with that, we'll be able to keep the characters in line with the creator's own personal vision of what the character is like. And hopefully that will carry through the universe. As it continues to grow, it won't be diluted.
He seems so young and naive.
Yeah, he reiterates, I've been working on a monthly book for 5 years now. This isn't going to be a problem.
But I love the fact that he's like, oh, you know, we're creating these new characters. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, all your characters are pretty much based off of like established characters, just different looks.
Oh, and Elite also talks about where else they might have taken Image to. Epic is one of the ones we considered. We talked to Kamiko, Tundra, all these guys, almost every publisher out there. We chose Malibu because they have an aggressive sales force. They want this almost as much as we do. And it worked out extremely well, I think. I don't know that any other publisher could have done the job that Malibu ended up doing with Image Comics. It just seemed like they were the exact right guys to launch Image.
What happened to Malibu afterwards?
Since its inception in 1986, Malibu Comics has shot into the comic book industry's top 5 with super-selling titles like X-Mutants and Protectors. And according to Malibu's editor-in-chief, Chris Holm, future growth opportunities are limitless. Malibu has several new projects slated for '93. One that's still top secret goes by the cryptic title Ultraverse.
Okay.
And that worked out pretty well for them as well. And then they sold out to Marvel. And now they cease to exist. And now people think that Topaz from Thor Ragnarok is supposed to be the character from the Ultraverse.
Yeah,
like that's going to happen. Sure, whatever. There's all kinds of fucked up rights issues with the Ultraverse. Marvel basically bought them to shut them down so they wouldn't have the competition. So after all that preamble, all those intentions of Jim Lee, it's funny to hear that concept of these corporate superheroes being pitted against one another. We really did not see that in the actual Wildcats book.
No, what he was talking about there seemed more interesting.
Yeah, but that's the problem with a lot of this
all these
stuff.
corporations having like gladiators battling for them and their resources. That would be actually kind of a neat take. That would have been different.
But what actually happened in the original Wildcats miniseries, which did not actually end up being 3 issues, my understanding, it was heavily delayed, just like all the other Image stuff. I think it ended up taking the better part of a year for 4 issues to come out, if not more. He had his baby sometime between issues 2 and 3, as I recall, and his intention had always been, according to him, to have the 3rd issue be a double-sized finale, but instead they split it into a 3rd and 4th issue, and it became a 4-issue miniseries, which is still closer to what he'd projected than some of the other Image books ended up being.
So then where did Zero fall in that? Because
Zero came out when they collected the miniseries into trade paperback. They shrink wrapped it with the Zero standalone issue that could be read.
Yeah, because Zero felt almost like a recap.
It was a recap. Well, in rereading the miniseries for this podcast, I remember reading Wildcats number 0 because if I remember correctly, I got the trade, but I didn't get it when it came out. I got it a few years later. And I remember looking at Zero, which had art by Brett Booth and probably one of the first things he ever did. And I was like, this is shit. This is boring. I don't know why this even exists. This is so lame. But in rereading it, it's like, wow, this really does a decent job of filling in exactly who the fuck these people are and what they're trying to do. Because I remember reading the original miniseries month to month or let's face it, months to months. I didn't fully understand what the fuck was going on in those issues, especially because there would be such big gaps in between them. I'd kind of get lost in what the hell the actual story being told was. And then there were a lot of like key details about who these characters were and how they relate to each other that wasn't conveyed well until the Zero issue contextualized them. So it almost seemed like a little fixer-up to help you understand the trade paperback better if you were coming into the book cold.
Huh, I did not know that. It's weird to hear his idea where he was going to take it because that actually sounds cool again.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting.
Instead, we have alien races that are on Earth, or our heroes are half-breeds of those races. And this is the funny thing. So that Brandon Choi, which was a friend of his, Choi, could not stand his writing. And I came to realize now, a lot of shit that I never liked, he wrote. If I saw his name as a writer, I just wouldn't even touch it because I just never liked it. And now I realize why I never liked Wildcats. I really didn't get into Wildcats until...
that's not true. It's not that you never liked Wildcats. It's you didn't like them at first. You liked the Wildcats eventually.
I liked Robinson's run, Moore's run. Now that's when I was like, oh, if this is Wildcats, I can read
Joe Casey's.
And Joe Casey's. I never liked anything before their run. James Robinson, his lead up to Moore was fantastic. This schlop that we're going through now, even the artwork wasn't that great. I was shocked. I was looking at it.
I would dispute that, but we're going to go into more detail. But don't go into the critique. Tell us the story. What actually happens in the first miniseries?
You're introduced to Lord Imp. He's a homeless man. Void finds him and tells him he's going to be a great man.
He's a little person, by the way. I don't
Yeah.
I mean, he's called Imp, but it's spelled E-M-P.
I always think of Tyrion.
That's an interesting thing.
Okay,
Tyrion,
really?
You know that George R.R. Martin is a comic book fan.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, I didn't do any heavy research for this because I figure we can always do that in later editions of the covering Wildcats. We'll cover them for quite a while because they're key to Image Comics, a lot of Image Comics stuff. I think that Jim Lee actually worked on the George R.R. Martin comics at Epic, like Wildcards, which was him doing his version of X-Men, basically, like people born with mutant powers and shit, if I remember correctly. I never read the stuff myself, but I think that's where one of the first projects Jim Lee did. So I'm pretty sure Martin was a Jim Lee fan and probably followed his stuff. And Lord Imp is kind of Tyrion.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying.
Like really, and he predates Tyrion.
He drinks.
Yeah, he's a heavy
fucks.
drinker. He's a big fucker.
Yeah.
He's charismatic. He's
an asshole.
glued. He's an asshole.
He's like I drink and I know
He's also
things.
a schemer. He's a clever guy.
Yeah, but
he's
he
a guy
drinks
who's
and he
got
knows
like
things.
kind of.
That's like that big saying for him.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was reading it,
And
I was thinking,
he's a really handsome dude, too. Reminds me a lot of Dinklage.
and so I read that and I was thinking, I immediately thought Tyrion. Like,
Yeah.
when I said,
He's even called Lord Imp.
Yeah. So he's found by Void. She saves him from...
And what is Void?
Void is she was part of a Russian cosmonaut crew in space who were bombarded by radioactive waves. Something
Cosmic rays.
Yeah, I got the Fantastic Four feel. They crash back in the Arctic.
She has silver armor over most of her body, right?
Well, no, that is her.
Okay, so she is the silver liquid
she
metal.
is. Yeah, because I
given
remember
human form.
I remember there's this great.
She's got the face is flesh tone, right?
Yeah, but there's
like
a
silver.
great issue one time where she actually removes it and turns out that's just a mask. Void is a void. There is nothing there. She creates the outer shell to have a feminine body, but she puts on a mask, that human mask. That's why she doesn't have pupils, so people can kind of like, oh, okay, she's normal, she's human, but that's just a mask. That's which we find out later, which is
a
like
way
kind of
to make them relate to her in a way.
So that's kind of, but she's basically a teleporter. You know, she can teleport the team.
She has like precognitive.
Yeah,
abilities.
she could see the future and kind of tell them stuff. And she rescues him from two guys who are going to
murderize him
for no
good reason. I don't know if he uses Void to amass a fortune.
No. She tells him he's going to accomplish great things. So I'm pretty sure she gave him tips. Like,
so I think that she told him future stock options.
Well, not just that, but she helps him build a massive corporation.
Multi-billion-dollar
Halo.
Inside of like 5 years' time, if I remember correctly.
Lord Imp is actually doing a Batman thing where he's funding a team of heroes. But it turns out there's this big war between two alien races that have crashed on Earth. The Caribim and Daemonites.
Yeah. And the reason why I know it's Daemonites is because they made a cartoon and that's how they pronounced it on that show. Let's break it down. It's angels versus demons.
Yeah, pretty much.
Angel aliens versus demon aliens.
And so the angels have little human babies with humans.
Yeah, half-breeds. Well, both the angels and the demons have half-breeds.
Do the demons?
Yeah.
I thought they just embodied humans.
Well, if the Caribim are humanoid, generally they're white people with model perfect bodies, and they're the good guys. The bad guys are brown, craggy-looking aliens.
Reptilian-looking creatures.
Yeah, they kind of look like a cross between the dire wraiths from Rom and the Brood from the X-Men.
Yes, I agree with that.
They are shapeshifters to some degree, although I'm not sure how pronounced their abilities are. The main thing they do is they can possess the bodies of human beings to act as their agents.
Yes.
And they also, I don't think they have like powers. They're just like strong and savage, and they tear people and they
can
possess
morph
people,
the
right?
bodies they're in.
To what degree do they have shapeshifting? Because that's one thing that confused me in rereading the miniseries. I don't remember if they're shapeshifters at all, or if they just possess human beings.
No, I don't think they're shaped straight. I think they just possess human beings.
Okay.
And so there are certain people who have special powers, even amongst them, that these two groups are trying to get a hold of.
More so, the Caribim. The Daemonites are more like generic alien race.
No, because Voodoo turns out to be half...
Voodoo is half Daemonite.
Yeah,
she's half human.
but she has the power of sight.
Well, hold on. Before we get too much into it, let's break down the members of what they apparently was going to be called Strafe at one point and became just the Wildcats. Because I think the intention based on the interview that he gave was that the Wildcats was going to be the name for all the different covert action teams that were working for corporations.
And then each one would have their own name.
Yeah, and I guess as it evolved, the team that was going to be Halo, Strafe, just became the Wildcats. When used in the context of the miniseries, Wildcats is just like a generic name for any of these covert action teams that work for corporations. Anyway, the team that Jacob Marlowe is his human name. Spoiler, Lord Imp is a Caribim, a full-blood Caribim. His team is Hadrian, codenamed Spartan.
This is Spartan. He's a bioengineer leader sort of combat leader of the team.
And he is an android, an artificial human form, who is in a red, white, and blue costume, and he looks like your typical patriotic type hero. He kind of looks like a Captain America type, but he's actually an android, so he's maybe more like the Vision in that respect.
This is Warblade, a Korean character that's able to elongate his fingers and other parts of his body, and he's a mean sucker.
Warblade is your Terminator 2 liquid knife guy.
While also simultaneously being their Wolverine, because even though he can form any kind
with
of
a
shape
green
with
ponytail.
with a long green ponytail that he ripped off of Gideon from New Mutants.
And so, he's your typical claw guy.
Yeah,
Like,
he's angry and he's slashy.
Yeah.
And that's like his entire characterization.
This big guy with the M on his head is Maul. He's the big brawny guy of the group.
Maul, who's your giant man / Hulk / thing.
More Hulk, I would say.
I would say more.
He's a scientist. Yeah, he's a scientist who turns into a purple creature that can change size, but the bigger he gets, the dumber he gets. Because what ends up happening in almost all the stories is that he gets too big and he goes on a rampage, and they have to do something about him.
Fun guy is Maul. You want to accentuate or increase the space between his nose and his lips, and then keep the space between his eyes and his nose small. Put an M on his head, give him a little pea brain, kind of a big jowl, hunchback, put his costume lines in, and he actually can have his teeth showing if he's angry. He can be happier, put the smirk in there. He doesn't know he's happy yet, but there he is.
Next you have...
Well, there's not really next. That's Jacob Marlowe's team. That's the team that he puts together.
What about Grifter and...
They're separate at that point.
Oh, okay.
But who are Grifter and Zealot?
Zealot, basically your female Conan the Barbarian, take no prisoners type. And the mystery man over here is the Grifter.
Well, Zealot is part of what? Like some kind of sisterhood.
Coda Sisterhood. Short version, she's an Amazon. She's an Amazon from Themyscira.
Yeah.
Sure. Like if the entire island were made up of like Electras and Psylocks, that's what she would be. She's in a red costume with short white hair.
Zealot, who is essentially void with hair and tattoos. Makes my life simpler. A little broader cheekbones here.
And then Grifter's, I guess, what, a...
Punisher combined with Gambit.
Oh, yeah.
He's like a cool, smart-ass guy who jumps around a lot, very, like, acrobatic, but he also runs around shooting guns and has combat boots.
And has a really cool mask.
He has, like, Cobra Commander's second mask was the one where he basically has a rag wrapped over his face.
Yeah.
But a cool rag.
Yeah.
Anyway, last guy is the Grifter. Very simple. Big sprout of hair coming out. Triangular shape. One ear. 2 eyes. Black talon shapes around his eyes, a couple wrinkles, an overcoat, black tunic, and voila, a Grifter.
I always thought that was kind of a cool mask. I'd never seen a mask
Everybody's
like that before.
favorite character was Grifter when the thing first came out, because he looked like the cool badass. And he had the trench coat, the green trench coat.
And then, of course, we're introduced to Voodoo.
Voodoo, the new age character of the group.
It takes a little time. She's introduced in the first issue, but it takes a little time with that. Because basically, there's another little person who's also an alien, who's named Troll, is it? Is that the guy's name? He's a broker of information. And he works with a team called the Cadre, which is...
No, you're thinking of Gnome.
Gnome. There, okay. Yeah.
Troll is that little Wolverine ripoff that's like...
Right. So Gnome is this little person who's an information broker, and he works with a team of mercenaries called the Cadre. The Troika. Was it the Troika?
It's some Triad, wasn't it?
Triad? Maybe it was a Triad.
Because you have Slag,
who's a big rocky
monster,
molten guy,
the lava monster, the robot guy,
cyborgy dude or whatever,
and then some humanoid guy.
I don't even remember that. I know there's 3 of them, but I don't even remember what the other guy was.
He looked from like Weapon X. He had the whole Weapon X look.
Yeah.
And so
they tell him that there's a being out there that can see the demonites and can basically reveal them to you. And so 3 factions, the Halo team, Grifter and Zealot, well, actually multiple factions, the Triad and the Demonites are all trying to get this one person who has the sight, who can out the Demonites. And where is this person located?
Strip bar.
In Washington, D.C.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they never specifically say it's a strip club. She's just an exotic dancer with an elaborate costume.
That's a titty bar. I
think later on they make it pretty explicit that she was an erotic exotic dancer.
Later on they did play up the fact that she was in strip joints.
Oh yeah. During the Alan Moore miniseries, if I remember correctly.
So
anytime Michael Lopez is drawing anything, they all look like strippers anyway. But no, it was very explicit.
She has the ability to, I guess, manipulate those around her, and that's why
they're kind of vague about her powers, because she's obviously the Jean Grey of the group.
She has psychic powers.
She can see the Demonites. She can force the Damonites to.
Out of their host.
She can exercise them basically.
Yeah.
She can force them out of a human host. I think she has like some mild telepathy as well. She can kind of read some thoughts to some degree,
Well, no, 'cause remember
or
she-
emotion. Maybe she's like an input.
Well, no,
kind of
no.
thing.
She controls Maul when he freaks the fuck out. She's the one that shuts him down.
She's still like an input. She can kind
Yeah.
of manipulate emotions to some
Yeah.
degree, or
Come
manipulate.
on, big guy.
Yeah.
It's getting kind of dark.
Yeah, very much like that. Yeah, everybody converges on the club at the same time.
Yes, and they're all battling, and it turns out that the Demonites are led by Hellspot?
Yeah, Hellspont is the guy's name. Yeah.
Which Hellspot did have one cool line that when I read, I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And he's talking about how the last time he dealt with humans, he only had to give them 30 pieces of silver to betray his master. And I'm like, oh, there's a Jesus Rifter. That's nice. I thought that was kind of he's the one that paid Judas. If I read that correctly.
I think it's a little bit of a punk move to call him Hellspont when you know that there's a character who's spawned the Hellspawn being created by another one of your guys.
Wait a minute. You're talking about they have a character named Pike who looks exactly like Deadpool.
Yeah, he was totally a Deadpool wannabe.
He's just a chunky Deadpool. That's it.
He's beefy, not chunky. He's,
okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
big,
Yeah, beefy.
And he's black.
Is it?
Because he's got exposed arms, and you
I never
can
saw that
see
part.
he's black. Yeah, or at least dark brown, we'll say. But
I saw Pike and I was like, I remember for a split second I was like, what is Deadpool doing in here? And then I realized, oh no, wait, these guys probably took some of their looks with them. So
yeah, well, yeah, and borrowed from one another as well. And he's a guy. Pike suffocates a guy in spaghetti. He actually like forced the guy's face in spaghetti and manages to suffocate him in spaghetti.
I thought it was weird. So he was human, right? The guy that they drowned in the spaghetti.
I believe so. Yeah, I think he was just working with the Damonites.
Yeah, because he was talking shit, and they're like, "Well, it's always good to get." He's like, "Are you pretty hungry there?" Because it's always good to feed a man his last meal, and then he drowns him in spaghetti. So I was like,
Yeah, and then there's that Coda chick who's dressed in purple, and she runs around with the spear thing. I don't remember her name.
I don't remember her name either.
But she hates Zealot, and she's like her
I guess they're from the same island.
Yeah, they're all Coda, so they're all from a sisterhood from an island of Amazon type chicks. Yeah.
Okay, so Hellspot's gonna turn on some kind of device.
Of all the things that reminded me of, it kept reminding me of fucking Howard the Duck.
I am now one of the dark overlords of the universe. Tonight, the laser beam hit the nexus of Summonus. It lies beyond the planets. It is a region of demons, to which we dark overlords were exiled eons ago. Tonight, the laser beam released me from that region of demons and pulled me down into that lab. During the explosion, I entered Jennings' body. It is time now. The code key. It will activate the laser spectroscope when I use it tonight to bring down the other dark overlord.
And so he's shooting a beam into space that's calling down these dark brown, the dark overlords of the universe. And they're all like half scorpion, all like brown with the multiple arms and shit. And literally it's like a pink beam through outer space, and they're all running towards the earth. Like they're actually physically running through a tunnel like the fucking Rainbow Bridge and shit.
Yeah.
And they do like the same thing in WildCATs. It's like, is WildCATs riffing on Howard the fucking Duck of all things? And it's called like the Convergence or something, or the Covenant or some shit like that. It's not the Unity. We just watched Justice League.
Didn't we just watch a movie on this shit?
So Hellspont is trying to call down the Damonites from their home planet to come help him invade Earth after being...
because something happened.
That's the big thing, too, we didn't touch on, is the Cherubim and the Damonites have been actually stranded on Earth for millennia.
Yeah.
Like their ships crashed here,
But
and that's why they
something
filmed
happened where it let the Demonites know that they can now do this. They were basically, it was a cold war between the two groups. No one group could ever dominate the other. And then something happened where now all of a sudden they can call down the rest of the army and just destroy the Earth. And they never really say what it was, that little balance and power change. They didn't bring it up.
Yeah, it didn't matter. It's all a MacGuffin to get people to fight each other.
But they're trying to start this fucking world engine thing, and Gnome and his crew turned out to be sabotaging it.
Oh, you know what? It was the orb. Remember that? The orb of power. They were trying to get that orb that has all the superpowers. Yeah.
Void says she has a dream where she's killed by the orb. When she's killed, the team fails.
And
the
I
world
think it turns
dies.
out it's not just a dream. It's actually a version of reality where that actually happened. And she shoots the memory, or she shoots her physical self backwards in time to change things to make sure that they don't all die in an explosion at that strip club in Washington, D.C.
You probably just wrote the story better than I read, I'm pretty sure.
It was very confusing at the time. And also a big thing, too, is they introduced the character of Lynch in this story.
Oh, yeah.
And he's
in
the
IO
leader,
or...
International Operations,
Yeah.
a Black Ops organization. He's the Nick Fury to their Shield. But it's
Sure.
more of a dark Nick Fury in the 70s when he was kind of a shady motherfucker. And it just so happens that instead of looking like David Hasselhoff, he looks more like Clint Eastwood back in the 70s.
Okay.
He's got got big old lamb chops and he's skinny but really angular and intense
He's
looking.
part of Team
He's got
7.
And he's got a cable scar. He's got like a scar.
One of
on
his eyes is out too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. His scar looks like Sam Jackson's from Ultimates.
Okay.
I think maybe they were kind of ripping off of that with Lynch. It's almost like a reverse callback because Lynch was obviously Image's Nick Fury, and so when they had Nick Fury,
But then Fury was missing just an eye, no scar.
yeah, he just had the eye patch. Yeah. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, he didn't even have the eye really out. I think it just I don't know why he wore the patch because I don't think he actually had any physical trauma to the eye. But when they did the Sam Jackson version for Ultimates, that's when they gave him the big scar that looks like Lynch.
Okay.
Io is the one who actually brands the team WildCATs, and again, it seemed like it was going to be a generic title for all the different covert action teams that didn't actually come into being. So it just became the name of this one team. And he's the one who's at the very beginning of the first issue observing the deaths of this group within the strip club. And you know that they've changed the timeline when he's observing them still being alive and they turn up in the IO helicarrier, whatever the fuck they're based in, after getting into a fight with IO's Black Razors. And at a matter of portent later on, that's when Lord Imp shoots one of the guys in the knee and kneecaps a Black Razor because that guy's going to come back later on.
That's right. They're battling over this damn machine, the org, and Gnome gets it and he blasts Void with it. And
that was a lot later because you're skipping like Hellspawn got it, and that's when he calls down all the Daemonites.
No. They start the machine, but the machine gets no, because you gotta remember the WildCATs were sneaking in, and Maul. Okay, so Maul, Warblade, Voodoo, and Spartan are going there, and the alarm goes off, and they can't figure out why because they find out that there's a mole in their group, which turns out to be the vice president Dan Quayle, who has a Daemonite in him, and Youngblood comes rushing in to battle because they're, I guess, the security force.
They're the U.S. government superhero, official sanctioned superhero team.
And
so it makes sense that Dan Quayle would have access to them.
And I believe...
And by the way, I want to say, too, I remember when I was reading the initial issues, Youngblood showing up didn't do much for me because I'm like, yeah, whatever, they're the only guys that are around for Image to, these guys to fight because Youngblood had just barely come out by that point.
That's their adventures,
I think they only had like a couple or three issues by the time they were already guest starring, so it didn't matter to me because I didn't know those characters. But in retrospect, given how few times the various Image creators' concepts got to cross over, especially as their relationship got rockier, for me it was so cool to see the the Youngblood show up and fight the WildCATs in this early story because I know we're not going to really get to see that ever again.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get to see Jim Lee in his prime drawing the Youngblood characters.
I still think it was okay.
The actual story doesn't blow me away. The actual interactions don't blow me away. It's just so nice to see it actually get done, though.
So the Youngbloods are fighting, at which point none of them figure out whenever Dan Quayle's screaming and squealing like a little pig to say, destroy them, my mindless
Youngblood minions.
Minions. He's coming off as a villain.
Well, no, I mean, to Youngblood's credit, this is probably happening over a span of minutes, if not seconds. And pretty quickly, Shaft's like, wait, what the fuck's going on here? There's something amiss.
No.
And that's when Dan Quayle shoots Youngblood Shaft in the head.
No. They don't do that until Dan Quayle puts the gun to Voodoo's head and he's about to blow her head off. And Shaft says, no, we caught them. We're good now. We need to stop. And he says, you don't talk to me like that. You do what I say. You die for me. And he shoots Shaft in the head. And
raises his skull. He's actually I don't think he even loses consciousness, does he? Just bleeds a bunch?
He has a little blood. And so that's when they're like, hey, something's going on here. So it took a gunshot to the head before they realized maybe there's something wrong here.
But again, this is over a span of a few minutes. And it was kind of cool that Youngblood decisively beats the WildCATs. However, at some point...
Not the whole team, though. They only fought 4 members.
It's true. There's no way of figuring out how this is supposed to happen because the entire team's there 1 minute and the next minute, like half the team disappears and is off on a side mission tracking the orb.
It turns out the team had broken into 2 parts. The alarms went off, so Youngblood caught the team A, but B with Lord Imp, Void, Grifter, and Zealot are team B. So they jump into the fight. By this time, Spartan's had the shit kicked out of him. He's missing an arm.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they made it clear in the earlier issues that he was an android. So it's kind of a big deal when they first reveal that he's getting ripped to pieces.
Well, he talks about how like his internal parts are repairing themselves.
Right. And it's Spartan who ends up shorting out the machine that Hellspawn needs to call in the Daemonites. So it's really Spartan who saves the day because he shuts down the machine. He is the Howard the Duck of the story.
But the thing is, it turns out that Gnome and his crew actually had set off the alarm because they were stealing the orb that Hellspot was using to power up his world engine.
Right. Basically, Gnome the whole time was pitting everybody against each other so he could sweep in and grab the orb for himself.
By doing that, it turns out Gnome was the character Void had seen in her dream that kills her. And he begins to blast Void with the orb once they confront him. And Lord Imp decides to blow off his arm with a gun. And the orb and his armor's falling down, and he does the whole Emperor, leaps behind it, trying to catch up to the orb.
Right. Which is actually, that exact moment happens at the end of the first Mark Waid arc on Captain America.
Oh, really?
The same thing happens as Captain America chops off Red Skull's arm with his shield, and then the cube falls down with the arm, and Red Skull chases after it. So the exact same scene happens.
Dude, they ripped it straight out. Oof, that's bad. That's
I'm sure they didn't realize they were doing that. But they did the exact
I'm
same
sure
thing.
they did, dude.
Really? You think Mark Waid intentionally ripped off WildCATs?
No.
That's almost as thin as
who
me
wrote it
thinking
first?
that George
Who wrote
R.
it first?
Jim Lee and Brandon Choi.
Dude, those issues had to be floating in the offices, man.
I was about to say, I doubt that Mark Waid intentionally is like, I'm going to rip off that sequence from WildCATs, but I also have a trouble believing that Mark Waid didn't read WildCATs number 3 and 4
say,
at
hey,
the time,
kind of a cool
because
idea.
everybody was reading these image books at that time. Everybody was looking to see what these guys were up to. So
I'm sure he was like, that's kind of a cool idea. That's something different. I can do that with these characters.
And actually, Waid might have still been an editor back then. It might have been just looking at the competition's work.
So yeah,
I don't think it's a conscious
I could see it being
thing.
Influential.
Probably more of a subconscious thing that like you don't remember that happening.
But it's also Mark Waid, though. Come on.
Well, Mark Waid's not particularly derivative.
Yeah, not a huge fan of his work.
Well, I like Mark Waid stuff. I don't think he would have intentionally ripped something off. He could have homaged, but I don't think he would homage WildCATs in Captain America. So I think it's probably one of those unintentional lifts.
The orb falls, the world machine is stopped, the WildCATs win the day, and now a few more people realize that they're demons that can possess human bodies. That's how
does it become public knowledge after that? I don't think it's all covered up, isn't it?
No, and the government knows now.
Yeah, I think Youngblood is aware because of having first-hand experience.
Because at one point Dan Quill's like screaming, stop in the name of the United States or some weird shit like that.
There's no clear indication that anybody knew about the Daemonite threat before this point. And I still think it's covered up, and probably like maybe IO and Youngblood know, but I don't think it's public knowledge.
I still hate the fact that I think Maul has a call phrase like, it's bashing time, or it's
I missed
big.
that.
There's a panel where they're about to fight Youngbloods, and he says something like, it's big banging time, or I remember reading that and I was thinking, don't you mean it's clobbering time? Like, just...
That's even worse than Yabba Dabba Doom.
Yeah, that's true. But let's see, where does 4 end?
Revealing that Spartan survives, that he just downloaded his consciousness into a new body. Because Voodoo, who is strangely attracted to this robot guy, because they're clearly doing a Vision and Scarlet Witch thing between those two, she's like, why isn't anybody upset that Spartan died on this mission? And it's like, because he didn't die, he's a robot, and he just downloaded his consciousness to another body. So everybody's like, ha ha ha, and then it freeze frames and the credits roll.
Well, don't forget that Lord Imp gives Void champagne, and she goes, I don't drink, Lord Imp. Why are you giving me champagne? And
Just this once, babe.
Yeah.
Trying to get in her pants. Also, I think it's worth noting, Hellspawn is the same alien race as Photon from the Youngblood. I believe they're called Accurans. Yes, he's the same race as them, and that's where he gets his exceptional powers, because he possessed an Accuran. He's like the only Daemonite to do so, and as a byproduct of that, Voodoo can't force Hellspawn's Daemonite out of his body. He's locked in there as long as he wants to be. He is one of the most powerful beings among either the Cherubim or the Daemonites. And it's also worth noting that, if I recall correctly, Grifter is full human.
Well, but he has powers. He has powers because
he has powers, but they don't tell you about that. Zealot is full blood Cherubim. Imp is full blood Cherubim. Warblade is a half breed. Same with Maul, but they're both Cherubim half breeds. And I don't know if they revealed it in this miniseries yet or not, but Voodoo's the only one who's a half Daemonite.
I don't think they do it in the series.
Yeah. Well, spoiler.
I don't really want to get too much into the storyline, because then you won't, check out the comic book. Look for WildCATs in early August, September, and October. And if the guys at Image approve it as a regular series, you'll see it in early '93. Take care.
Let's see, we got some Facebook attention from Joe Crawford, Derek William Crabb, Pat Sampson, Ali Batts, and Michelle Fife. Tumblr follows came from Lady Hawk Things and KG Bunked, which is Keith G. Baker. And then we got some of that Twitter action from the 108th Sage, 20th Century Geek, Ali Batts, Beer Today Gone Tomorrow, Biko Django, Bones Cafe, Bots and Turtles, Cash Flag, Charlton Hero, Chris Sheehan, Cinnabud Podcast, Dirty Bit Podcast, Dolise, Ed Moore at Indie Comics Fan, Marvel Bronze Age, Miskatonic, Teal Productions, and Urban Fantasist, The Fanholes Podcast, Goldmine LLC, Grateful Dalek, The Hammer Strikes, It's Plastic Man, Janice H. Rackley, Jeffrey Brown, Joe Crawford, Justice First Dawn, Kaiser Leo, The Man on the Wall, Michelle Fife, Mike Radcliffe, Rachel Zukalis, Rad Adventures Podcast, Podcast Network, Robot Boombox, Sean Phillips, Silver and Gold Podcast Network, Siskoid, Son of Cthulhu, hashtag Tag Fan Art, Terrence Castengway, Trekker Talk, Warlord Worlds, Wulan Ayu Paramita, and Yoart Tag Fan Art.
Thank you all.
Rad Adventures wrote, time for the latest episode of Spawnometer from the gang at Rolled Spine. Justice First Dawn wrote, the debut of Prophet, I'm so in. We all scream and scream and scream for more Spawnometer. Kaiser Leo writes, Billy Kincaid, that dude was a real piece of work. Yeah, that issue was a bit iffy. I agree on your point that issue did help put Spawn into a more of a horror genre. Michelle Fife wrote, good point regarding Faust. It isn't far off the mark from what I thought Spawn's origin drew from the most, the Crow. Back from the dead and driven by his love for his lady, except Spawn is less explicitly revenge-driven, and his wife is alive and well. Not only do I prefer Youngblood #1 as originally published, especially in Murray's great coloring, but I firmly believe that Youngblood #2, also in its original form, is the platonic ideal of an extreme comic. Which, using platonic ideal and extreme in the same sentence is just...
You're about to get franked.
Yeah, no,
Enjoy.
it's just, there's just some cognitive dissonance there. When we were doing tweets, I was looking at the original and new pages of Youngblood. If they could process the Brian Murray art as well in reprint form as they did the new coloring, I think I would definitely prefer the Brian Murray stuff. But I do think overall the Murray stuff is much more inventive, and I do gleam to it more. I just enjoy Liefeld with computer effects and the shininess and the brightness, because the only version of the original Youngblood I can find is in the Baxter paper, and the color processing, the printing of the colors just doesn't translate that well to that paper versus the glossy stock and digital forms that you can do with the more modern digital coloring. But as far as the choices made by the colorist, I do prefer Brian Murray stuff as well. As far as the Crow thing, I definitely think that Spawn looks and acts a lot more like Faust. There's just a lot more of Faust in Spawn. I think that the Crow may have informed Shadowhawk a lot more. Not necessarily in the premise, but in the execution, because I actually have a lot of trouble. I'm a huge fan of the imagery of the Crow. Before I'd ever got to read the Crow comic, I got to see a lot of like imageries on and things like comic shop news and solicitations and pinups and stuff. And I just loved James Albar's artwork. I still love his artwork. But when I try to read the actual Crow comics, both back then, but especially now, really fucking squiggy shit going on there with race. Because I don't know how much you know about the origins of the Crow, but basically Jim O'Barr's girlfriend was killed by a drunk driver. And so the Crow was a way for him to process all the emotions he was feeling about her death in comic book form. So he has it to where the girlfriend is instead raped and murdered by a bunch of black dudes, and then he kills those black dudes over the course of the miniseries. And the depiction of the characters, how they look, how they act, the way they talk. And there's a guy who's from Detroit, so, you know, there may have been some authenticity to that, but it's very grindhouse and very uncomfortable in a modern context. And I think it was always pretty uncomfortable. For years, I wanted to try to cover the original Crow comics. Every time I start to, I can't not have like a scorched earth approach to the story itself. And I think that discomfort is more parallel to the way Shadowhawk was handled. But I want to touch on some Faust stuff later on. If you get the chance, you should probably try to read a little Faust too to see how you feel about it.
Yeah, that was a hard one to find.
And then Michael Wagner came in with a clarification. I believe that Michelle Fife is Latino. Mr. Fix-It, spelled phonetically. You remember we were having a little discussion about Michelle Fife in the last episode. Michelle Fife clarifies further, French first name, Scottish surname, Cuban born, huzzah. And then our buddy Mac comes in with, you got Michelle'd. Because remember, we got Franked.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were trying to turn him into a French Canadian, and he's actually Cuban.
I forget about that, yes. Being franked.
Oye, como va, película? You know.
Yeah, I wouldn't go there, man.
I got castroed. No?
Nah, I still like franked.
Franked was pretty funny.
Yeah, it just has an oomph to it.
But I do love Michel Fife's comments. He's a guy who's coming at it from a very intelligent and very knowledgeable place. I think he's actually maybe working on an Extreme Studios project currently, because he keeps treating images of the Youngblood characters.
Welcome, everyone. It's a Wildstorm Addiction podcast. I'm Joe David Solis. I'm Ben Murphy.
For those of you who have been listening here at the Comic Addiction, you've probably heard me on the Image Addiction podcast with Chris Parton and Mike Smith doing some of their retro reviews. Tonight we're going to be talking solely about Wildstorm. For those of you out there who have never heard Image Addiction or never been to the Wildstorm boards or seen any of us discussing, or Ben and I both hail from the Wildstorm Resource Wiki. If some of you never been to that, you can find that on Google just by typing it in. It'll be the first thing that pops up. But
pretty much,
we'll just we'll take a few minutes to let you know a little bit about us. I've been pretty much following Wildstorm since the beginning. Followed Jim Lee when he left X-Men. Followed a lot of Image comics in the early days, but there was just something about the Wildstorm universe that just really spoke to me. So that the characters just really attached to me. Obviously, Grifter. I mean, for those of you who've seen my Twitter page and everything else, Grifter just pasted here, out there, and all over the place. Obviously, the Wildstorm universe has had its ups and downs over the years. I've followed them during both. I'm just glad that after 15 years, dear God, I can't believe it's been that long, but after 15 years worth of this company existing, I'm just glad that I get to kind of share the love, that I have for it out there.
I also have been with Wildstorm throughout its tenure. I started collecting when I was 12. My stepbrother had showed me a lot of the Uncanny X-Men that Jim Lee was doing. And at that time, I was not into comics at all. And I said, hey, what should I pick up? And he mentioned this artist that I really enjoyed and I did a lot of copying of. He told me that he was starting his own comic book company, so I kind of jumped on board right there with WildCATs #1. I've been hooked ever since.
If you want to contact us and ask us about anything that we talked about on the show tonight, you can catch me on Twitter at Grifter78, and you be sure to visit us at the Wildstorm Resource Wiki, where you can find both Ben and I. Ben, you want to tell them how they can get a hold of you?
You can find me on the Wildstorm Resource Wiki. I'll be Yo-Yo Master in some form or another. And you can also hit me up on the Wildstorm forum.
Anyway, thank y'all for listening, and hopefully we'll get to do another one of these, and we'll see y'all later.
This is a fan-produced, not-for-profit podcast. No copyright infringement is intended, and any use of copyrighted materials believed to be covered under fair use. If you don't agree, you can go straight to hell!